Hello and welcome to the M is for Mama podcast. I'm your host, Abbie Halberstadt, happy wife, mama to 10, Bible-believing Christian. And on today's episode, we are doing our What Do You Want to Know Wednesday podcast style edition for April. So I'm answering some of your questions today. But before we dive in, I want to highlight our podcast sponsor, Voetberg Music Academy. It's such a fun song-based way for kids to jump right into being able to learn and play music quickly. You can use one membership for the entire family, and you can get 20% off each month that you're enrolled with the code M is for Mama 20 in lessons in piano, guitar, mandolin, ukulele, and fiddle. There are also possibilities for fun perks like cash and badges that your students earn for practicing in challenges like their 6 Songs of Summer challenge. You can check it out at VoetbergMusicAcademy.com. I also want to mention Adele Natural Cosmetics. They are a family-run, holistic, handmade skincare and cosmetics company. Everything is made in the US. And I want to put a personal note on this by saying that we were actually burgled. I used the word robbed and someone corrected me and said it should be burgled. A couple of months ago when my husband and I were in Dallas and someone smashed his window and stole our bags out of the back. We were traveling and not able to take all of our bags out with us everywhere that we stopped. And most of my personal care products, including all of my skincare and makeup from Adele, were stolen, and they replaced all of it, no questions asked, and sent me a really sweet note. They are a precious Christian family that I've met in person, and I think that you will love both their products and the heart behind their company. You can also use the code M is for Mama for 25% off your first order, so be sure to check them out. Okay, so it is What Do You Want to Know Wednesday podcast style time, and this is where I take some of your common questions that you ask me when I usually do these on social media, and you get maybe a slide or two, and then I break them down into a longer form response here on the podcast. You guys love these, and you always submit such great questions. And I notice a lot of times that as you are sending questions in, there are often themes. And there were 2 very specific themes that emerged this week. One of them had to do with personal appearance and kind of vanity and how we balance taking care of the temples that are our bodies, our faces, our, hair, all of those things, and how we also do everything, which would include dressing ourselves, fixing our hair, putting on makeup or not putting on makeup, bathing ourselves, using certain products as unto the Lord. Like what's the balance there? I will say, prefacing this topic that I'm about to dive into, that I feel like we can over spiritualize things. It's not to say that everything isn't the Lord's. It is. But I do feel like there is a lot of freedom in Christ to make certain discerning choices that maybe a lot of prayer and a lot of different factors go into, but still aren't necessarily something that we could say, here's where I'm going to pinpoint a verse that was the undergirding for my entire choice. Or here's the historical Christian argument for wearing makeup or not. Here is the stance on kind of how much a garment can cost, or it's too much, or whether you can buy something from Walmart because it's a fast fashion company. There's just a lot of factors that come into play. And I would say that, like I said, I'll preface this, or I'll start this off by saying, I do think there's a lot of freedom in Christ here, but that you shouldn't do anything against your conscience. I do think that there are going to be different things that prick our consciences for different reasons in this particular arena, and that you shouldn't do anything that your husband, I'm speaking mostly to wives and mothers, not all of you are married, not all of you are moms, and there are some men that listen out there, but don't do anything that your spouse is diametrically opposed to. A lot of times women, particularly, especially in our culture that tends toward feminism, can really prickle at the idea that any man, even your own husband, should have a really strong say in your personal appearance or in your preferences when it comes to choices that are freer, maybe a little bit muddier in terms of not having a specific verse that you can just stack them on top of. But if we were to flip it around, for example, let me give you an example. I love my husband's beard. I have never seen him fully clean shaven, nor do I want to, because I love his beard so much. It's just part of what makes him him. It's part of what makes him Sean. And so he knows that. And I don't think he has any desire to shave it. After all, it's way easier to just keep a beard, and his beard is really soft and it doesn't bother him. I know some men don't care for having beards and they bother them, but he loves it. And it probably makes his life easier to just have to trim it and then go on instead of shave every single day. But I know that at least part of his choice to keep it for the entirety of his life since I've known him, which is a good 21 years at this point, is because I love it so much. So I have influence over his personal care choices, and he doesn't have any resentment for that. Now, I'm not controlling about it and I'm not overbearing about it, but he takes my desires into consideration. So that would be, don't do something against your conscience. Don't do something that your spouse really doesn't care for or enjoy, unless you have a really, really good reason. And do pray about it and seek wise counsel if you still find yourself feeling uneasy about your choices or not sure where you should land. So the number one question that I have been asked recently in relation to appearance is makeup. Should you wear it? Should you not? If you do wear it, how do you explain why you do it? I don't think that there is a hard and fast, should you wear it? Should you not? I think one of the main verses that I've seen used to support not wearing makeup is 1 Peter 3:3, which, depending on which version you read, exhorts women to adorn themselves not with this list of things, but with true inner beauty. And so, for example, the ASV, which I can't even tell you what the ASV is. It's just the first one in this list. I'll have to look up what the ASV is. It says, whose adorning, let it not be the outward adorning of braiding the hair, of wearing jewels of gold, or putting on apparel. The AMP, which is, I guess I can tap on this and see, that's the Amplified Bible, which was what I was assuming. Your adornment must not be merely, that word is in italics, which either means that it's emphasized or it wasn't there originally in the text. I have not specifically done a deep dive into this. I just hear this quoted to me a lot. Must not be merely external, with interweaving and elaborate knotting of the hair and wearing gold jewelry, or being superficially preoccupied with dressing in expensive clothes. So that's an amplified version. Obviously, that's had a lot added to it. The AMPC, which is the Amplified Bible Classic Edition, says, let not yours be the merely external adorning with elaborate interweaving and knotting of the hair, the wearing of jewelry, or the changing of clothes. These are not versions that I use usually. So let me get to a version that I actually do use. This is the ESV, which is considered a little more literal. It says, do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry or the clothing that you wear. And then it goes on to say, rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. There are other versions of this. I think the NKJV, if I remember correctly, also says not merely doing this, but instead adorning yourself with the inner beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, great worth in God's sight. So you could take this to mean that you are literally supposed to avoid braiding your hair or doing any kind of fun hairstyles, elaborate, more decorative hairstyles, that you're supposed to wear your hair very plainly, that you're not supposed to ever wear any jewelry, that you are never supposed to wear fine clothes, and that you are not, I think they're lumping makeup in with that because it goes in the same category. And then I want to put a pin in that, and I want us to go back to Proverbs 31. And it talks about how the Proverbs 31 woman clothes her family. It says that this is among her lists of attributes and virtues and things that she's very industrious about. It says she makes bed coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchants. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. There is this idea that she is choosing quality workmanship and materials with which to work that would belie a claim that any kind of expense or quality in clothing is a negative thing. So whether or not the word merely is actually in there in that 1 Peter 3:3 verse about adorning yourself, I do think that overall, the overarching theme is your adornment primarily is not the outward. The thing that makes you truly beautiful is the inward. If you get obsessed with the outward and that's where you're finding any form of beauty that you have, then you've lost the thread. You probably are so focused on being adorned outwardly that you neglect the inner, beautiful, quiet spirit and that loveliness before God that is humility and generosity and thinking of others and serving Christ first. So I think it matters the attitude with which you dress yourself, the attitude with which you apply makeup or don't apply makeup. Because on the flip side, one thing that's very clear here is that an attitude of pride, of looking down on others for different choices, and of sort of making yourself lofty in your virtue by choosing not to do some of the things in the first half of the verse would not be considered beautiful in God's sight. So whenever I see someone coming from a place of feeling holier than thou, and I honestly don't see a lot of this personally, at least from my readers, I'm not getting this impression when they're asking me this question. I think the question is asked out of a genuine desire to do things in a God-honoring way and to bring glory to Christ. But also sometimes it comes from a background in a certain kind of belief system, whether it's the Mennonite or something else entirely, where the baseline belief is that not wearing makeup is a standard for every Christian woman. And that there might be some people that believe that that does kind of elevate your holiness. Whereas I think what's going on here is a look at the heart. Do you have a kindness to your spirit while you put on your mascara? Or do you have a haughty spirit while you don't? Or some combination of the two? Now, to the question of makeup specifically, I think this is where I'm jumping back to the over-spiritualization concept. I don't think to make up or to not make up is explicitly Christian or biblical or unchristian or unbiblical. Again, the heart attitude with which you do it matters. And I would say, for example, one of my sponsors that I just mentioned is Adele. They have a beautiful spirit in the way that they serve their customers, in the way that they treat the people that they work with, in the care that they put into the products and the ingredients that go into those products. And I love their heart behind that. And I love that they're making it into a family business where they are praising the Lord, but also producing quality products. And I am proud to use their products since I do wear makeup. But the question of whether or not to wear makeup in itself sometimes is something as simple as a cultural trend or a cultural tradition. So let me give you a completely different example that doesn't have anything to do with makeup specifically, but is related to outward appearance. I'm going to give you the example. This is just one that pops into my head. I hope this is not offensive to someone because I do not mean anything by this, but this is just an example that popped into my head that will hopefully illustrate my point, at least to some extent. It is common in Indian culture to wear a sari, where you take, there's a skirt element and then there's kind of a crop top element. So there's a bit of your belly showing, and then you wrap yourself in fabric. And if I am describing this incorrectly, I apologize. I've never personally worn a sari. So I'm just describing it from like personal observation. And there would be people here in America within Christian culture that would consider the combination of the skirt and the crop top, even with the extra lengths of fabric wrapped around, to be something they wouldn't choose to wear for modesty's sake. And yet I think that there are many Christian women in India who would wear a sari and think nothing of it, not because they're trying to draw attention to themselves, not because they're trying to be immodest by showing possibly a small part of their belly or something like that, but because it's a part of their culture that is so deeply ingrained that it is not only acceptable, but it's also expected and celebrated and something unique to them. And I think that's really beautiful. Now, I can't say that wearing makeup is like this deeply beautiful part of a particular culture, but it is a common cultural practice across the world to wear makeup either, and there are plenty of reasons to do so, either to enhance your features, to hide your features as a form of self-expression, or just because it's fun, because we as women like to beautify things. And you could say, for example, this is a little different, but if you have a dining room with white walls and no pictures on the walls, and you have a table to eat and you have chairs to sit at, then you have all you need for, you have protection from the wind and the rain and the snow, you have a roof over your head, we're assuming, and you have a place to sit and you have a place to put your plates. And let's say you have food to eat. You could have the mindset that you're done. There is no need to do anything else to that dining room to make it functional. And it is inherently best in its simplest form, because what else could you need? Anything that you add to that is vanity, is materialism, is unnecessary, right? In the same way, you could say that our bare faces are everything we need. And that is completely true. And that anything that we add to that is inherently vain, self-serving, misleading. You could, all kinds of other adjectives that are negative. Or you could say, God has given women this desire for beauty, and he's given us freedom to do fun things like put wallpaper on the walls and put a rug under the dining room table, inadvisable as that may be, even though I personally do it and end up with a lot of crumbs on my rug that I have to vacuum a lot. Or, could say that we could use lip gloss or we could use mascara because we enjoy it and it's fun. So it all comes back to the heart. Am I decorating my house? Now, again, this question was about makeup, but I'm trying to kind of make it a broader scope so that we can see some parallels to other things we do that someone who says you can't wear makeup would say that you could spend time beautifying your home. When the question is, what's your heart? What's your goal in any of those scenarios? If your goal is to obscure the features that God gave you because you're ashamed of them, if you can't leave your house without makeup on, if you can't because you're afraid of man's opinion, if you are conveying to your daughters that their worth is found in outward beauty and in enhancing it, I'm putting air quotes around enhancing it. There's a whole lot of people that would argue that you look much more beautiful without makeup on. But I'd go back to those original three questions. Is this something that you have a strong personal conviction about with biblical support that wearing makeup would go against in a way that it violated your conscience? Is it something your spouse really does or doesn't want you to do? And then have you prayed about it? And if you're able to answer all of those with satisfaction, with a clear conscience before God, I say go forth and wear makeup if you choose to, or abstain if you choose to. Now, if it feels like I spend a lot of time on makeup, I feel like it's because this issue is not just reserved for things to do with the outward appearance. It's so much of how we approach anything in life, where there's not a specific verse that says, thou shalt do this or thou shalt not do that. We are given a lot of leeway to use discernment, to seek out wisdom, to pray and seek God's face. And the Bible makes it very clear that if someone knows that they should do something and they don't do it, for that person, it's sin. Or if they know, you can flip it around. If they know that they shouldn't do it and they do it, for that person, it's sin. And sometimes that means that you've got an immature Christian who hasn't yet had something specific revealed to them and they have more to learn. And sometimes you have a case of a Christian who's grown up in a legalistic background, who's had things revealed to them that are really from man's wisdom rather than God's wisdom. And they have to peel some of that back and recognize that it's a tradition of man more than it's a command from God. So maybe that seems like a convoluted answer, and maybe it seems like a cop-out to say it's more about the heart than anything. But I think that a lot of us can recognize pretty quickly when someone is using something outwardly to adorn themselves in such a way to fill a deficit for what's lacking inside. And when someone, even if they're wearing mascara and lip gloss and blush, truly radiate the joy of Christ because their identity and their beauty is found in Him first. And I say this as someone who has struggled with something called trichotillomania my whole life, since I was about 4 years old. It's a hair pulling OCD kind of impulse control disorder that makes it really hard during certain periods of my life. It's not constant, but during certain periods of my life to not pull out eyelashes, eyebrows, or hair. And different people have different degrees of intensity in how they struggle with this. But I have worn, I don't wear makeup at home usually, unless I am getting ready for something where I'm on camera and my face needs to show up. Like there's just a certain aspect of a camera completely washing out your features like it doesn't do in real life. So putting on a little bit of something so that your features show up in the on the screen is helpful and practical. Or if I'm going out. But I will say that it is hard to think past not using any makeup outside the house when your eyebrows and your eyelashes aren't in good shape because you have this particular struggle. So that's just a whole other layer that's very unique to me. And it's something that I've had to speak frankly about to my own daughters, that this is an insecurity that I have because I'll be asked questions or people will look if my eyelashes are particularly struggling at me like I am, a freak, or at least that's how my brain interprets it. And I have really, really matured past that, both to do much better about not pulling, but also to not care nearly as much what people think. But that's what it boils down to. What is your heart motivation? Is this a fear of man issue? And are you doing something in such a way that can bring glory to God, even while it's a form of self-expression? Because I don't think that the two have to be mutually exclusive. I also had some questions about how to pursue physical health and or care for your body, even if it's just or primarily the appearance of it, without becoming obsessed, and kind of what the balance is there. And oh my goodness, that is an entire rabbit hole that we could go down. And I actually have done an entire episode, both on my struggle with trichotillomania. I did an episode with my friend Ann Swindell, who also struggles and actually has written a really good book. And I believe that is episode 16, but I'll have Ezra link that in the show notes. And then I also have done an entire episode on body image called Tools, Not Treasures. And again, the number escapes me because anytime people ask me what number something is, what an episode is in terms of like its numerical value, I'm like, I don't have that memorized, but I can go look, or I can have my son go look. And so I'll have him link that in the show notes. And I think that would be a helpful one because I kind of did go down the rabbit hole of how we can take care of our bodies without becoming obsessed. That is a balance I have had to work on striking for many, many years. I do not always achieve it still. Some days I wake up and I feel self-loathing for what I see in the mirror because I wish it were different. Some days, and that doesn't happen nearly as often as it used to. But I would be lying to you if I said that I woke up just thrilled to death with what I see in the mirror every single day, especially as I'm in my 40s and nothing is as young or as wrinkle-free or as anything as it used to be in my 20s and 30s. But I have in the same way that I do better with trichotillomania than I used to, partly because of learning how to handle it practically better, partly because of maturity, partly because of growth in the Lord. It's the same with this body image issue. So someone asked me what my relationship with the scale is. Do I get on the scale? How often? How do I feel about it? And I will say that a huge part of my journey toward more freedom in not being self-loathing or not being self-focused when it comes to the appearance of my body has to do with breaking up with the scale. It's not that I never get on it, but I almost never get on it. In fact, when I was pregnant with Titus and Toby, who are 4.5 years old now, I already was avoiding the scale, not obsessively like I can't look at a scale or I will spiral. It wasn't like that. It was just, I knew that the scale was not the full representation of my body's health or my mental health, and that I was capable. I had proven to myself, unfortunately, in the past that I was capable of getting too focused on those numbers and worrying about them and letting them inform my view of my body's worth. And so I had chosen to not look already before that pregnancy at how much I weighed, just went on how my clothes fit and the kind of food that I was eating, if I was drinking water, if I was taking my vitamins, and just knowing that I was caring for my earthly temple well, and then not worrying too much about it going forward. With Titus and Toby, my midwife knew from past pregnancies, I think I'd already done this in another pregnancy, at least once, maybe twice. I had asked not to be weighed, or if she felt like I had to be weighed, which she didn't. She just saw that my belly was growing, that I was within a reasonable weight gain range visibly, and she left me alone. She, everything looked good, sounded good when she listened to his heartbeat, all of that stuff. So when I went into my traditional OBGYN visits, because I split care between a midwife and a traditional OBGYN for Titus and Toby, they required me to get on the scale, and I would just face the other direction. And they were not, they didn't do anything about it. And I saw the number on the scale several times. I didn't avert my eyes to the point that it was going to scare me if I saw the number. And it was like, oh, I've gained, this much weight at this point. And it didn't send me into a spiral, but I didn't want it to be a primary focus. And I feel like that has been so freeing for me. And I don't think I'm alone as being a woman who can let those numbers say so much more than they should be allowed to say in our brains and over our bodies and over our worth. And so if that's something that you feel like you could do, highly recommend. It also just keeps you from feeling like you need to check in all of the time. Now, I will say that having gotten on the scale maybe 2, possibly 3 times since I had Titus and Toby, it is a much higher number than it used to be. But one thing I do know is that I am taking the best care of my body that I ever have. That doesn't mean I'm doing the most exercise. I have definitely been more hardcore about my fitness in the past. But I am caring in a way that is focused on long-term health, on longevity, on mobility, on being able to keep up with my kids as they get older, run with them, play pickleball with them, take long walks with them, go hiking with them, do physically hard things, exert myself and sweat and not be left behind as I age, at least as much as possible. And that's my goal. Do I like to see benefits in changes in my muscle definition or in the size of my body if I'm working really hard or like clothes that I can fit into? Sure, I'm not going to complain. But when I make the focus on my body, like I said, is the name of that podcast, being a tool to be used for the Lord and to be able to be used to care well for my family, as opposed to this treasure that I'm trying to put in a glass case and preserve for all of, history, as if that's even an option. We see so many celebrities who are letting the world tell them their worth is tied up in their external looks. And they are obsessively chasing this fountain of youth. And even so, they're not able to ever find it and keep it. It's always, that that fountain of youth's water is always running dry, always slipping through their fingers, always turning a little bit rancid because something they try doesn't go right. And time marches on, and even the Jane Fondas and Chers and Demi Moores and all these people that have done so much work to look, quote, as good as they do for their age, are still going to find themselves as old women who look like old women one day. Or worse yet, they end up in a situation where they are elderly and they look so desperately as if they're trying not to look elderly. And I think that one of the most beautiful things about aging is the signs of life that appear. I don't always like the wrinkles on my face, but I do love seeing that I have laugh lines that show that I have giggled and guffawed and just cried with laughter with my children and my husband, and that I have smiled at them a ton. Same with the ones around my mouth that I don't always maybe like the look of, but I love what they represent. Or all the freckles on my skin that show that I'm spending tons of time outside playing pickleball with my family or hanging out on the hammock with my children like I just did last night. So my relationship with the scale is the healthiest it's ever been. And I mostly don't think about it very much. And I praise God for that. Again, it's not perfect. I have low moments. I have moments where my focus gets off, but I'm grateful for progress. And I think that's the goal, is to be sanctified each day, to be more and more like Christ, who was not someone that the world considered attractive, who had no outward beauty of his own to compel people to come to him. So everything that compelled people to come to him was because of who he was, not how he looked. And that's such a sobering thought, even as I acknowledge that as women, beauty is going to be important to us. And I think God made us that way. So that balance, man, it's one that we're always trying to strike, and it's one that we're striving for and probably will be till we go to glory and get new bodies, which won't have anything wrong with them. And we probably won't care one way or another. Another related question to this idea of outward appearance, taking care of our bodies, I think even verging over into wellness and this hyper obsession with finding products and things that work really well for us so that we can feel our best and function our best. That's driven by so many social media posts and quote unquote influencers and all of that. Someone asked basically, where's the line between taking good care of ourselves and becoming obsessed? I think I've talked about that line quite a bit already, but the line has to do with where your focus is. Is your focus on taking care of your body well as unto the Lord, on serving others and being capable of doing so as much as it depends on you? Because there are going to be so many things that are outside of our control, so many factors that we cannot finagle and get just right. And then again, are you obsessively chasing down some standard of youth and or wellness that just completely drains your grocery budget? That's one thing that people will always ask me, like, do you think the supplement is worth it? And I will say, not if it tanks your grocery budget, not if it puts you in debt, not if it's a source of stress for your husband or he feels like he has to go out and earn extra money to support this wellness habit. Absolutely pray about what you can do within your means and whether there's something that you can do. Because I really feel like there is an element of the Proverbs 31 woman that comes to mind, going back to her, where she's proactively doing things so that her family can function well and enjoy good health and, linen bedding and high quality clothing and things that are made with great care and intention. And there's an element of her work ethic that very much so has a sweat equity aspect to it. She's willing to put in the work to have the standard of living that she wants for her family. And So in verse 13 of Proverbs 31, it says, she seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. So from all of the profit of this hard work, she is finding real estate to invest in, considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hand, she plants a vineyard. Now, obviously, this is hyperbole. There are not enough hours in the day for one woman to accomplish all of these things. This is an archetype rather than a specific person who works from before it's light in the morning until well after it's dark at night, doesn't get enough sleep, burns herself out. We all know what this actually produces as moms. Overwork, burning the candle at both ends means that you're stressed out and cranky and your cortisol levels are super high and your health is in the toilet. So again, we're not trying to model never sleeping, working our fingers to the bone, being a real estate mogul while also making all of our families clothing and food, and also growing all of our families' food single-handedly, no help apparently. Although I know she has her maidens and her servants or her people that work for her. But it says her lamp does not go out at night. She puts her hands to the distaff and her hands hold the spindle. She opens her hands to the poor, so she's generous. She reaches out her hands to the needy. She's not afraid of snow for her household, for all of her household are clothed in scarlet. There's that idea of high quality clothing again. So hear me out when I say that I'm not saying you have to do all of these things to be a good wife and mom or a good household manager. But we do have this example of a woman who doesn't just say, I sure wish that I could. She takes practical measures. And I think that going back to that idea of where is our conscience pricking us? What do our husbands say as we've prayed about wisdom and sought godly counsel and used the example of others as a guide rather than as a source of envy or comparison or discontentment? Where have we landed? What has been revealed to us as ways to improve our health? Because I think there is a broad spectrum. There's the throw the hands up and say, this whole wellness thing is really overwhelming and these people are obsessed and I give up and I'm going to sit on the floor and eat Lay's potato chips and drink Dr. Pepper and I'm done. Like, I'm out. All of that stuff is so stressful. It's way more toxic than the toxic things that I'm putting in my body. There's that mindset, and there's a kernel of truth there, because if we get obsessed with appearance, living forever, wellness, holistic, this, that, or the other, then we can stress ourselves out more than when we were just rocking along, not even knowing what we didn't know, right? But then there's the, and then that's the pendulum swing to the obsession. But there is some balance that can be found of saying, where is the messy middle of, for our family and our budget, this makes the most sense to buy ingredients and put a little more effort into making snacks or just having very, very simple snacks that don't have to be made at all, like fruit and cheese sticks and meat sticks and just minimally processed things that are easy to grab and eat. Easy, healthy meals. Like I talked about some of our favorites in my 100 Mom Things podcast, part 1 and 2. I think it was in the second one where I talked about all of our meals. Just simple things that don't actually cost more than the unhealthier version. So yeah, finding that balance. And so again, it's praying about which direction the Lord would have you go to provide the best quality products for your family without obsessing over them. Does it mean that you hand make some? Does it mean that you do a subscribe and save on some so that you get the best possible deal? Does it mean that you do an affiliate situation so that you can get a discount and maybe earn a little bit if you share about them? There's lots of options. And I don't think that there's a one size fits all answer, except that obsessing over them and making them an idol is not the right answer. Speaking of some of those examples I gave of ways to potentially help your family's budget stretch to include some more holistic options or some supplements that you want or things like that. Someone was asking me about my blog and how many years it took to monetize it. So I have blogged for 14 years as of this upcoming June. So almost 14 years now. And I did not monetize my blog for the first decade, hardly at all. And when I say hardly at all, I mean essentially not at all. I think I did a couple of little product collaborations here or there through the years, but I didn't earn any money from them. They were just a fun little piece of content to do with a brand that I enjoyed. And I will say that the reason that I did not monetize for as long as I did, so I'm going to be a terrible example of how long it takes to monetize, because I certainly could have started monetizing much earlier than a decade into blogging. But the reason that I chose not to was twofold, because it was a very conscious choice. One was because I didn't love my options of people that were reaching out to me. I have had some brands that are very recognizable, like Nike, like Tide, like Procter and Gamble products, reach out to me, and they just, I couldn't choose to represent them because they did not jive with either the ethos of products that I actually choose to use in my home. So for example, we don't use Tide. So of course, I'm not going to do a collaboration with a company that I don't even agree with on the ingredients in their product, for example. Or because the company was supporting things, openly, blatantly supporting things that I could not support myself, whether it's abortion, whether it's LGBTQ initiatives, or whether it's a focus on environmentalism that actually is detrimental to human beings. So where it's a focus on creation. And yes, we as human beings are created, but we are the first order of created beings, and humans are distinct from animals and plants and oceans, and they are the only creations that bear the Imago Dei. And while we are given the world to steward, there are some companies whose focus is so laser beam on making the world better that they end up doing that to the detriment of humans and not finding a balance. So I wouldn't partner with a company like that either. So there were some moral objections, some ideological objections, some ingredient objections. And that was one reason why I delayed or avoided doing very many product placements or any kind of monetized content, because I just couldn't find good alignment there. The second reason was actually one of a conflict of conscience, but also how it would be perceived. So for a long time, I felt like it was, I would not have worded it this way. And so I'm wording it this way now for simplicity's sake, but I just thought it was holier not to monetize. I found that I don't know if it was pride or whether it was true conviction, but it was like, I mean, if I keep everything completely free, then people will actually know that they're getting good content from me, that it's not, it's not incentivized in any way. And that will be kind of a purer way to go. And I think that as long as your attitude doesn't become prideful, and I think mine could, for sure. I think mine could tend that way and did tend that way at times. I think that is a completely legitimate way of looking at it, because it's true that if you share 100% free content, then people will know that you have no underlying motives. Well, you might have underlying motives, self-promotion or promotion of a particular ideology that you're really big on pushing or whatever, but you won't have underlying monetary motives, right? And so I think that you could start monetizing a blog if that was something that you wanted to do to benefit your family's income and to supplement your family's income much, much sooner than a decade. Because there are, and this is a question that I get asked often on What Do You Want to Know Wednesday, which is, what are some practical ways for moms who choose to stay home, who have a one income family, to supplement their family's income without taking a massive amount of time away from the care of their home, the care of their children, the educating of their children, the making of the food and all the things that go into being a keeper of the home and a mom. And I don't really have a ready list for you. I'm going to list a couple as possible options, but I don't have personal experience with most of them. So that it would just be suggestions off the top of my head. You can do what my lovely assistant does, which is a virtual assisting job. And she is a homeschool mom of 5 young children, and she helps me out with all of my speaking engagements. She helps me out with my brand partnerships, which I'll talk about more in just a second because I had a follow-up question that dovetails with that perfectly. And she is able to earn income from home, spending the vast majority of time with her children while also being a significant help to me. So virtual assistant positions are a relatively new-ish concept. And I think that they are a great way if you have contacts with people in the podcasting industry or in the social media industry who just need help managing all of the nitty-gritty stuff that comes along with that world. And you have organizational skills and time management skills and are good at writing emails and communicating well, that's a great option. Obviously, you can have some online positions where I'm going to show my ignorance in this, and this is why I don't generally try to make like master lists of things that moms can do because I'm not the right person for this. But you can do online things where you do, for example, reporting for companies that need moms to do computer work. I can't tell you any more than that. I just know they exist and that is something that companies need. They need people to sit down on computers and write up reports and run numbers. And sometimes they just need part-time positions to be filled for that. And that's something that you could research. I know there's also options where you can do reviews, like be an Amazon reviewer or an Amazon affiliate, but a lot of times that requires having a social media presence. And having a social media presence, even if it's not a large one, even if it's not something that you want to include your family in, if you just have a niche where you want to share about thrifting, or you want to share about recipes, or you want to share about making your own soaps at home, for example, in the wellness arena, then you can grow a following that is like-minded and wants to hear from you about the best products to buy. And so those are just some options. Blogging is wonderful because you can embed links that stay there, whereas social media is a little more ephemeral. You have to make highlights to save things and people have to be able to find them that way. In blogging, if you have a particular article that has links embedded in it for your recommendations for your family's favorite toys or family's favorite care products or things like that, then those kind of stay out there for forever. And whoever's doing a search can run across them, buy from your link. You get a little bit of money. You help support your family. And if you really hustle, that's kind of a fraught term. But if you are diligent and consistent, you could make more than a little bit of money from that. Obviously, you can have a small business. I will say that most small businesses that I've encountered have a lot more time investment because if you produce a physical product, then obviously you have to make that with your own hands, produce that, package it, and send it out. And that's a lot of work. And if you have small children particularly, that's going to be a source of stress. And I know this from personal experience. I will say that a really good idea, in addition to blogging, social media, all of that, or that at least ties in with those things, is if you are artistic and can create something that can be easily replicated and sell digital copies of it so you're not having to remake the product over and over again, that is a great way to earn some side income without having to redo the product each time. Yes, you have to set yourself up a website or an Etsy, get a social media account going. But that, I do believe, genuinely is one of the benefits and one of the boons of social media, is that it allows moms to do a version of this Proverbs 31 woman approach where you're working hard and you are investing in your family monetarily, but you're not having to leave the house or necessarily take huge chunks away or not have any flexibility. Flexibility is huge. I've said this before, but I don't have set working hours. I have particular times of the week where I typically do things. Like I usually podcast on Monday afternoons, which is what I'm doing right now. After a full day of homeschooling and cleaning and teaching a fitness class in the morning and all of just the normal Monday life stuff, I usually have a little bit of time to podcast in the afternoons, and I usually get one episode recorded. I would love to be able to batch record, but it just isn't happening at this point. So knowing that I have the kind of work that I can move around throughout the day, and I might have a typical time where I get it done, but if it changes, I can still fit things in the cracks. That kind of flexibility is awesome. And it is so key for moms, especially since kids, even if you have them on really good rhythms, don't always stick to those rhythms. And you don't necessarily have a guaranteed outcome in terms of, like I said, office hours, or I for sure will have time to do this. The question that I had that went along with all of this, because I had the kind of what can moms do to produce income? How long did it take you to start producing income as a blogger? Which my answer is a little bit roundabout and different than a lot of people's, because I didn't have a goal of becoming a monetized blogger as quickly as possible. In fact, I shied away from it quite a bit. But the flip side of that question was someone who said, what made you decide to start earning an income as a social media person? What made you decide to go the quote unquote influencer route, which is still a word that I struggle with because of certain connotations, but sure, that's the name of the job at this point. So we'll go with that. And I have no idea. I know that the attitude behind the people that were asking, like, how can I earn an income for my family, was definitely out of curiosity and a desire to learn and a desire to replicate something that someone else is doing. I don't know what the attitude was behind the person that was saying, what made you decide to do this? I don't know if it was curiosity and because they're considering it. I don't know if it was because they don't like that that's something that I've chosen to do. Who knows? Either way, I'm happy to answer it. A variety of factors. One, and again, I did not monetize for many years. One big one was that I really started to have a shift in my mindset around the personal care products that I used for our family. I remember when a really good friend just said something simple. She said, my mom is really overwhelmed, because we already had a pretty decent diet. I was already buying ingredients and making decent food for my family. We drank water. We got outside in the sunshine. We moved our bodies. Like, just some of the basic things were covered. But she was talking about how her mom was on this health journey to try to avoid toxins because she was having a lot of health issues and she felt so overwhelmed. And she said to her mom, your skin is your largest organ. Start there. Don't put things on your body that you know cause you harm. And I had already kind of been toying with the idea of changing out our personal care products, but with so many people in my family and with so many options to choose from, it just felt really overwhelming. And I hadn't gotten very far down that path. And that line, your skin is your largest organ, so why would you put something on it that you know that's harmful to it, just really stuck out to me. And it was the beginning point of a lot of really small changes. This is, again, I would say 4-ish years ago, that have culminated in much better personal care product options and choices for our family, where we're not using things with toxic fragrances in them or endocrine disruptors in them, phthalates, sulfates, parabens, dyes, things like that. I'm not obsessive, and everything's not perfect according to a completely crunchy mindset by any stretch, but we've made some shifts. And as I started researching things I wanted to shift to, and as my audience was growing on my social media, I started talking about these things more. And guess what? People started asking me for links. And what I found was really interesting is that people didn't just want me to tell them, I use this. They wanted me to send them to a specific website with a specific link to the exact product. So if I would say, for example, that I liked to use Dime Beauty for example, they would say, but what are the products that you like? Which are the products that you like the most for them? Do you have an affiliate link? I want you to get credit for this. And that may sound like I'm making that up, but I kid you not. There was a pretty significant amount of time where someone would ask me, what's your favorite skincare? And let's say that I said Dime Beauty, or Adele Cosmetics. I would then be asked for a list of things. And if I said, hey guys, I don't have the time to track down all of the specific links or curate these are my favorites. Here's the landing page for all of my favorites, but here's the name of the website. I would still have people come back and say, but what's the specific link for something? And I think that's because of quote unquote influencer culture. I think that's because people are used to having the link provided directly on the screen in a social media post or in a story. And when they're expecting that, I think there's a little bit of pushback against kind of just go find the website and do it yourself. And I found myself a little bit frustrated with this mindset. And I would say, I don't have time to do all of this, but here's a starting off point. And people would literally say what I just said a little while ago, but I want to make sure that you get credit. And I remember thinking, but I'm not asking for credit. I'm just telling you where to go to find this thing, and then trusting that you will find the products that work best for you. I also did not have the bandwidth to deal with all of the emails I was getting as I grew on social media that were reaching out to me to work with me. I didn't have the bandwidth to research to see whether these were companies that I could work with if I wasn't already using their products. And I didn't have the bandwidth to manage all of the communications. And so there were a couple, very small group of brands that I knew I loved their products because I had been the one that researched them, tracked them down, and had bought them for months, if not years. And then they would reach out to me. They would see that I was using the product and say, hey, we love what you're doing. We would love to work with you, give you an affiliate link so that you can share links with this is what people were asking me for. Where's the link where you get credit, but it's easy for me to just tap on it and go find the product. And so I worked with maybe 2 brands, maybe 3. I could be forgetting a 4th, but it really was not very many. Until spring of 2022. Is that correct? 2023, I think. And I had probably worked with another brand here or there, but as far as a long-term partnership, it was like 2 or 3, maybe 4 brands over the course of a year. And I just told my husband, I was like, I cannot juggle any more than I'm already juggling. I am doing all of the momming and wifing and household managing stuff. Plus, I have books to launch. That was the spring that we went to Europe, planning for Europe. And my first son's graduation that year was a whole thing. And I'm like, I am drowning in administrative things, and I just need someone. And I've told the story of how I found what I call my unicorn assistant. She's just such a perfect fit for me and my brand. I'm using air quotes, trying not to say quote unquote too many more times, but it is my brand. But I even now shy away from saying it that way because it's just who I am. It's Emma's for Mama. It's what you see and what you get. And it's something that I've been working on for 14 years. But just I find myself so surprised at where the Lord has brought it, but also just feeling like this is just me, you know? And it feels very unofficial and unpolished even now. It's just doing the next thing that I'm able to do. But the next thing that I'm able to do has been expanded by the fact that I now have 3 people that work for me. I have someone that does all of my highlights on my social media and does some graphics for me. I have my assistant that handles all of my email communications with any kind of work-related things. And I have my son who edits and produces this podcast and gets it out to you guys. I just record the content and he takes care of the rest, which I absolutely love. And I have never joined an ad agency. For those of you that are not in this world, that's not going to mean much to you, but there are ad agencies that approach you as a quote unquote content creator. There, I said it again, as a content creator. And they basically want you to sign up with them, and then they just funnel offers towards you. So big name brands, like I was mentioning earlier, would constantly be in your inbox saying, we have a campaign going for this particular amount of time. We want to work with you for this. We're going to pay you this amount. And I know for a fact that most of those ad agencies would not be populated by companies that I want to work with, either for the ethical reasons or for the ingredient reasons. And so I have chosen not to join any of those. But my capacity has been increased because the Lord brought along a young homeschool mom who needed a supplementary income for her family and who happens to be a perfect fit for my personality, whose strengths are similar to my own in some ways, and then a perfect foil for my weaknesses in others, who is so easy to work with, whose personality I enjoy immensely, and whom I love that I get to help support in her family's endeavors to raise their children and pay for things and just work together as a family. Like, I get to be a small part of that, which I love. So she helps manage my speaking engagements, my scheduling for my podcasts. And if I did not have her, then you would not see a lot of the things that you see me do, because again, there's only, I have a limit, and there's only so much I can do before I reach that limit, and the emails do not get answered and the contracts do not get signed. I would say beyond the having more capacity and more bandwidth, because I have some people working for me now, and the realization that people are asking me for these links anyway, there's also the biblical concept of a worker being worthy of his wages. So sometimes I will have people that are irked by my sharing content that I make money from. I can tell you that I'm very, very picky about what I share, that it's stuff that I use daily. In fact, I was just on a trip with my best friend who I've talked about her many times before. Her name is Lindsay Long. She does the illustrations for my books. And we were on a trip to Dallas where we were planning more illustrations for more books. And she was going through some of my personal care products and was like, oh man, I love this. Cause like, I'll give her some things and she'll try it and she'll be like, oh, do you have any extra of this? And this is my favorite. And I ordered this because of you. And she said, I should just do your promos for you because I see how much you enjoy this stuff and how you use it daily and the ones that you love the most. And those are the ones that you talk about. So I said, I know. If we could just do a fly on the wall promo here, that would be great, because people would be like, oh, she really does enjoy the things that I talk about enjoying. And I know some of you are not social media people and are going to send me an email and say, Abbie, can I have a list of the things? And I'll put just some of my favorites in the show notes. Yes, they will be affiliate links that I will get a small credit for if you order from them. But if you don't order from them, or you just look up the name and go research it and buy it, it's elsewhere, I am totally fine with that as well. And so then I would say the last piece of the puzzle in terms of being able to work with brands now is that I have really honed in on and pared down to the ones that I researched, found for myself, absolutely love, was already using. And then so many of them have reached out to me, even without an ad agency, to curate these brands for me, and just have worked out to be such an organic partnership, because it's like, oh yeah, I would love to work with you. I would love to be able to offer a discount code to my audience because I've used your product for a year because I felt a need for that product. So I went and researched it and found it. A perfect example is non-toxic whitening strips that I use, that I actually researched for my son after he got his braces off and was feeling like he'd like his teeth to be a little brighter. And I was like, okay, but we're not using bleach and we're not using these products like Crest that are not good for you. I'm going to go find something that's good for your oral microbiome and can help brighten your teeth after braces without causing them all kinds of problems. And I found this brand called Lumino. And then they approached me and I was like, yeah, sure, let's work together. So that's kind of a roundabout answer, or maybe a very fleshed out answer for how that has become something that has benefited my family. But I mentioned the worker being worthy of his wages. Sean was the one that really did a good job of helping me see that there is a biblical precedent for being compensated for time that is spent on work projects. This is not a new concept to me. I was a teacher for years and I got a paycheck. But I think that there can be a mindset that's like, if you teach and you get a paycheck, that's okay. But if you talk about a product and offer a discount code in your affiliate, that's not okay. And if that's where you land, I probably can't change your mind, and that's okay. But my husband, who is a really good businessman and a really generous spirit, and one of the least money obsessed people I know, while still doing a good job of being a good steward of being a provider for his family, was like, hey, you take the time to do this, so being compensated for it is a good and a fair thing. So that kind of helped my mindset as well. So that hopefully answers your questions in that arena, and probably will help some of you who are trying to decide whether you should do that small business and whether it's okay to charge what your time is worth. Yeah, it is. Or whether it's a good idea when your husband is encouraging you to seek out a little bit of side income to fill in the blank. If you have the capacity to do that without it becoming a huge source of stress or completely throwing off your ability to manage your home well, by all means, at least you could give it a try. I think that those are things that we can freak out about a little bit and think that we have completely put all our eggs in a basket. And there are plenty of things I have, quote, tried through the years that were not a good use of my time, that I found were taking my focus away from my family and were not compensated well and were just a distraction. And so finding that balance, man, I just keep saying finding that balance, but I feel like that's a theme of the Christian life, and finding the things that work well for your family without going overboard one direction or another is always going to be the goal. I am out of time for the day because I need to go make some dinner for my family. But I hope you guys found these topics edifying and helpful today and gave you some food for thought going forward. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. If you enjoyed the MS for Mama podcast, I would be so honored if you would subscribe and follow along, maybe share with friends, or even leave a review. And if you want more content on motherhood and biblical responses to cultural issues, be sure to follow along on Instagram at m.is.for.mama.